Good morning, everybody. So, it's one of those rare morning video that I do on my channel, but today I am going to do something that I was supposed to do last week, but unfortunately didn't have the time to do it, so now it's being delayed all the way to Tuesday morning, which is look at every single team and the free opponent that they are not going to be facing this year. So, as mentioned before, for the first time in MLS history, we are going to have an unbalanced schedule, which means that each team will have at least three, well, not at least three, but three opponents that they are not going to be playing. And those three opponents are interconference opponents that they are not going to be playing. So, if you're playing the Western Conference, there's going to be three Eastern Conference teams you're not playing. And if you're playing in the Eastern Conference, there's going to be three Western Conference opponent that you're not going to face. And I know people complain about the fact that we're going with an unbalanced schedule and that it does give an advantage to some teams that they get to avoid the tough team doing this season, and that it does give a disadvantage to teams that aren't able to avoid those tough teams. But all I'll say about that is that, you never know. This season, things can really change up, and that some of the teams that I know, some teams are going to be complaining about the fact that, oh, we avoid all the easy opponent and now we have to play all the hard opponent. You never know. I mean, the easy opponent that you are avoiding might actually be a very tough opponent and might actually be very good, and that you might be happy the fact that during the season you avoid them, and that we can say the same thing about you playing those hard opponent, and that maybe those hard opponent that you are facing is actually going to be very easy, and the one that you didn't want to avoid as the teams that you're avoiding this year. But without further ado, let's actually begin, and we start with alphabetical order with Atlanta United. They will be avoiding Colorado, Vancouver, and Dallas. I think they're kind of the unfortunate ones that they're avoiding some of the easiest team in the Western Conference, but you never know with Colorado. They could definitely be a very decent team. Same thing with Vancouver and Dallas. They can if those youngsters can get up to the next level, that might be a team that Atlanta want to avoid. And keep in mind, they did lose to Dallas last year, so I guess in some way they're happy the fact that they don't have to face them again, and that they potentially don't have to potentially lose them again. And I also know that I think Atlanta tends to have a bad record against Dallas. I think the last two times they lost to Dallas. So I think Atlanta will be happy the fact that they're avoiding them. Chicago, they are avoiding Houston, Nashville, and RSL. Again, those are kind of the opponent that I'm pretty sure Fire fans didn't want to see them avoiding. I mean, besides RSL could be a challenging opponent, I think they could have won against Houston and Nashville, but again, you never know. Those teams could be very decent throughout the season. FC Cincinnati, they're going to be avoiding Colorado, Houston, and Seattle. And besides Seattle, I think Cincinnati kind of feel like they didn't want to avoid Colorado and Houston. But as I said before with the Rapids, they could be a very decent team. And Houston, if they're playing at home and if FC Cincinnati is going on the road against them, that could be a bit of an issue. And it's kind of tough to talk about these teams that, you don't know if they're going to be good, and that some of these teams, I know they're going to not do very well this season, and it's kind of tough to talk about how, you're avoiding these three teams and that it kind of gives you an advantage or disadvantage when you're already bad in the first place. So it kind of gives you an advantage to avoid those three teams, but then again, you're already a bad team, so, avoiding those three tough team or avoiding those three easy team doesn't really matter in some way. I don't know, but and I'm not saying FC Cincinnati is a bad team. I'm just saying some of these teams, last year they were very, very bad, and Cincinnati obviously were one of them. But if you're a bad team heading into this year and a team that you probably think that they could not be a team that's going to be in playoff contention, I don't think it really matters which three opponents you're going to be avoiding this season. The Rapids, they avoid Atlanta, FC Cincinnati, and Miami. So besides Atlanta, they probably could have beat FC Cincinnati. Miami is a tough one because you never know what they are going to do. So far with these expansion team, there's always a wild card factor of what they're going to do in the first year. I mean, I know I've been saying that Nashville coming into the league, they're probably going to be like FC Cincinnati with the moves that they make, but you never know. They could really light up the league. And that Miami, a lot of people thought that they're going to be like the next LAFC or Atlanta because Beckham has the money to bring in big players, but right now they are kind of in a bit of a hole and they haven't even figured out who exactly is their new manager is. So yeah, Miami could actually struggle heading into the first year, and it might be a team that, you know, at first when you talk about how they might be the next LAFC and Atlanta in the expansion team, you're happy the fact that you avoid them, but maybe not. Now the fact that they're kind of in a little bit of a problem. Columbus. So they avoid the Galaxy, LAFC, and San Jose. And I think of all the teams that avoid the free opponents this season, Columbus is probably the most unique in terms of the free opponents that they avoid, because for whatever reason, all three of those opponents that they avoid is from California. And I don't know what Columbus had against the California team, or that I think the schedule maker think Columbus hates the California's team and don't want to make the trip to Colufornia. So that's why they basically put all three of those California teams that they are avoiding against. I mean, I don't know what that is the case, and you know, it is what it is. At least the good news is Columbus don't have to play against a defending Supporter Shield champion. But other than that, you know, the two other California teams, you would think that they probably could have won those games. Dallas, they avoid Atlanta, New England, and TFC, which that sounds like a free Eastern Conference team that you want to avoid too, although I'm pretty sure Dallas will really want to play Atlanta because, as I said, they have a good record against them and that they won the last two matchups when they face against Atlanta. But the other team, New England and TFC, are teams that I think Dallas would be happy to avoid. DC, they avoid Portland, RSL, and Sporting KC. And like FC Dallas, I think DC will be happy to avoid all three of those teams, because all three of these teams could be playoff team and could be a very decent team heading this year. The Dynamo, they avoid Chicago, Philly, and FC Cincinnati. And unlike the previous two teams that they're happy to avoid those free opponent from the other conference, I'm not so sure about Houston. I mean, besides Philly, I'm pretty sure they're not happy the fact that they avoid two teams that they probably could have beat. Although, having said that, they did lose to FC Cincinnati last year, and they were one of the few teams that actually lost to FC Cincinnati last season. But I guess, you know, as long as if I believe two of these opponents that they have to go on the road, or actually one of these opponents that they have to go on the road, and the other two they can play at home. As long as if they avoid teams that they have to go on the road against, then it's a good thing, because the Dynamo are one of those teams that for whatever reason they cannot win on the road. The defending Supporter Shield champ, LAFC, they avoid Columbus, Orlando City, and TFC, and it's such a shame the fact that they're not playing TFC this year, because everybody want to see that matchup, and that's one of the most juicier kind of interconference matchup that we are going to get. And I remember last year when both of these teams faced off each other, it was a very intense match, and almost a match that resulted in the first loss for LAFC at Bank of California Stadium that season. But you know, we're not going to have that matchup. And the other one, Columbus and Orlando City, you know, those are kind of the teams that LAFC wish that they didn't have to avoid. But you know, as I said, with bad teams, of the fact that it doesn't matter the free teams that you avoid, because you're going to be bad anyway. It's kind of the vice versa about good teams. Like the good team, they don't really care the fact that they get to avoid those free good teams that they're going to face, or avoid the free teams that they think that they can get easy 3 points against them. And that I think LAFC, you know, no doubt they're going to be challenging again this year, and that I don't think it doesn't matter if they avoid the toughest team or the easiest team, they'll still do well this season. The Galaxy, they avoid Columbus, Montreal, and New England. So another one of those teams that's kind of a little bit unlucky with the free teams that they avoid, because I think these opponents, they could potentially win. But these are also free opponents that can definitely surprise a lot of people, so that maybe the Galaxy will be lucky the fact that they avoid those free teams. Inter Miami, they avoid Colorado, Sporting KC, and Vancouver. Again, you know, free opponent that they probably wish that they didn't avoid, but as I said, these three opponents, maybe besides Vancouver, where, no offense to Vancouver, but I feel like since they're gonna have to start a rebuild again, they're probably not going to really be challenging in the playoffs, unless the fact that, well, I know they already made a big acquisition in Lucas Cavallini, but I feel like they still have a long way to go in terms of being a competitive team. So I guess it's kind of unfortunate the fact that Miami does avoid one of the easiest teams that they have to face next season in the league. But the other two, they could definitely be a very decent team, and that Miami are going to be fortunate to avoid them. Minnesota, they avoid NYCFC, Philly, and TFC, and Minnesota is one of those lucky teams to avoid some of the toughest opponent. They avoid the top team in the Eastern Conference, they avoid the third place team last year in the Eastern Conference, and they avoid the Eastern Conference champion TFC this year. So yeah, they're very fortunate the fact that they avoid three of the toughest teams that they potentially have to face in the Eastern Conference. Montreal, they avoid the Galaxy, Nashville, and TFC. That's actually wrong. They don't avoid TFC. They're actually rival of each other. Let me see on it. They avoid Portland actually. I don't know why I wrote TFC. Obviously, they're not going to avoid TFC because, one, they're rival each other. MLS is not going to put a team that is gonna the team that they're not going to be playing is actually a rival to each other. And two, they're actually in the same conference. So Portland is actually the team that they avoid. And this is also where I get to say that, well, I get to kind of make this excuse, the fact that since I did this in the morning, I tends to be a little bit kind of wonky in the morning, and sometimes I put the wrong information, and there you go. There's the mistake that I make here. So yeah, they avoid Portland, Nashville, and the Galaxy. Some good teams that they get to avoid in the Western Conference. Not the toughest team that they get to avoid in the Western Conference, but definitely manageable. Nashville, they avoid Chicago, Montreal, and the Red Bulls, and all those teams they could potentially beat this season. But again, Nashville, it is kind of really hard to tell how are they going to do this year, and that I'm praying that they're not going to be like FC Cincinnati, but in case if they're going to be like a bad team, as I said before, it doesn't really matter who the three opponents that you are not going to be facing. New England, they are not going to be facing Dallas, the Galaxy, and Vancouver. And again, the Revs, they're kind of a little bit unfortunate, the fact that all three of those teams, they could have easily won against. And I think probably they belong, I don't really have, I didn't do, a power rankings in terms of teams that, the three teams that they avoid this season. I didn't do a power rankings where the top is going to be the team that gets to avoid these three hardest opponents this season, and then at the bottom it's the team that unfortunately have to avoid these three easy team this season, because again, you never know as we get into the season where teams of course are going to, some of the teams that you of course are going to avoid might actually be good, and some of the teams that you also avoid might actually not be as good as you first thought when you look at the schedule. Then we go to NYCFC. They avoid Minnesota, Portland, and RSL. That's a pretty good three teams to avoid for NYCFC. Not the toughest Western Conference, three Western Conference teams to avoid, but definitely teams that I think NYCFC would be happy to avoid seeing. The Red Bulls, they got Nashville, the Quakes, and SKC. Again, that's kind of a little bit unfortunate because, I think those three Western Conference team, besides maybe SKC, might be a teams that you would love to play and get all 3 points, especially against the Quakes, where the Red Bulls always tends to beat the Quakes for the past couple of years. But yeah, still, we'll see how it's going to go for all three teams, and whether or not if the Red Bulls kind of are very fortunate to avoid those three teams. Then we get to Orlando City, where they get to avoid LAFC, the Quakes, and Seattle. And, going back to what I said about the power rankings of the teams of the teams that gets to avoid the three hardest team, they would definitely be right up there in my power rankings of the team that got lucky to avoid all those three hardest teams. I mean, besides the Quakes, they get to avoid the defending Supporter Shield champ and the defending MLS champ at the same time, which should be a those are the couple of teams that I think an Eastern Conference team would love to avoid, and Orlando City gets the luxury of that. The Union, they get to avoid Houston, Minnesota, and Seattle, so, you know, not bad in terms of the Western Conference team that they get to avoid. I mean, at least they get to avoid the MLS Cup champion and Minnesota, which could be a very decent team heading into this season. Houston is the one that I think they could have got all 3 points against them, but still, you know, no, I think they'll be happy the fact that they get to avoid two of the team that make the playoffs in the Western Conference, and one of them just won MLS Cup. The Timbers, they get to avoid DC, Montreal, and NYCFC, and although they did avoid the toughest team or the team that finished top last year in the Eastern Conference, I guess they're probably a little bit unhappy the fact that they get to face two teams that they probably should get all 3 points, and two teams that seems to be a team that you want to face if you are a Western Conference team. RSL, they get to avoid Chicago, DC, and NYCFC, and I might as well just do a carbon copy of what I said with Portland to RSL case. Those are two Eastern Conference teams that you would think that they would love to play and don't want to avoid, and that they at least get to avoid the team that finished top last season in the Eastern Conference. The Quakes, they avoid Columbus, the Red Bulls, and Orlando City, and, you know, again, I know people, when they see this, and when I first saw this, I was kind of a little bit unhappy because those are 3 teams, except for the Red Bulls, that I think we could have won. Then you also got to remember what I said before of the fact that some of these teams can be a very dangerous team, and maybe Columbus and Orlando City could be a tough team this season, and that we can, of course, we're very fortunate that we get to avoid them. And keep in mind, besides the Red Bulls, Columbus and Orlando, that is on the road this season. So you know that when the Quakes are going to be facing a road game against an Eastern Conference team, and anytime when they have to go on the road against an Eastern Conference team and we get to avoid that, that is a big bonus because they never win against an Eastern Conference team on the road. Besides last year when they beat TFC, which is kind of like once in a 5 years kind of miracle that the Quakes perform when they go on the road and go to the East to play an Eastern Conference team, are pretty much 99% of the time they would lose. And that 1%, which did happen last year against TFC, they were able to walk out with 3 points. Seattle, they get to avoid FC Cincinnati, Orlando City, and Philly. And like what I said about the Quakes, you know, those are 3 opponents that you would think that they would be happy, or they'll kind of be a little bit unhappy that they avoid them, because those are 3 opponents that Seattle could have won against. But like I also said about LAFC, when you are a good team, like which I think Seattle is going to be once again this year, I don't think they'll really care the fact that they avoid those 3 easy team or to avoid those 3 hard team, because they're going to do very well this season either way. So moving on, Sporting KC, they avoid DC, Miami, and the Red Bulls, and man, 3 in a row where I have to kind of say that these teams are kind of a little bit unlucky to avoid these Eastern Conference teams, because these Eastern Conference teams definitely sounds manageable for a Western Conference team to beat, but it is what it is. And that, I know I repeatedly said this multiple times, but I'm going to say it again, some of these teams that they might be facing could actually be decent, and that they'll be happy during the season the fact that they are not going to be facing them when they find out that these teams are actually very decent. TFC, they get to avoid Dallas, LAFC, and Minnesota. So, you know, those are 3 opponents that I think TFC will be happy to avoid in terms of the Western Conference. I mean, they get to avoid LAFC, which is the Supporter Shield champ, even though, as I said before, I really want to see that matchup because that's one of the juicier interconference matchup that we get to see this season. Vancouver, they get to avoid Atlanta, Miami, and New England, and I think the Whitecaps is also one of those teams that are lucky the fact that they get to avoid three of the toughest Eastern Conference team. Well, actually, they get to avoid Atlanta. Not quite sure about Miami yet, and New England. they're kind of a dark horse kind of team and could be very decent, and could be a team that I think a lot of people would see them thinking that, oh, we can get all 3 points against them, and it's a team that, you know, I'm happy we avoid them. And then it turns out that, or a team that we are not happy that we avoid them, then it turns out in the season they're actually very decent and that they're happy the fact that they avoid them. But yeah, either way, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the teams that you're going to be avoiding this season? Do you like the fact that your team that you support are avoiding those 3 teams that you're not going to be playing this season? Or you're not going to be happy the fact that you're avoiding 3 teams that you think your team could easily get all 3 points? But let me know in the comments below. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.